So I'm going to quick go through what this code is doing for the transition and transformation page. And when you first load the page, there'll be a little delay, like a second delay for the first box, but it will kind of morph in shape. The second box is set to bounce at an angle, and it reverses direction. You can kind of see it's nice slow motion. The third box, when you point at it, it gets larger and changes color. Then the text, if you point and hover over it, it's going to get bigger and change color. Okay, and that's pretty much what the page is set up to do. It is a responsive page, which means that as you adjust the size, it does adjust. Okay, and we'll go ahead and take a look at the code. So this is set up as a flex box, and so that was put in the body, and the sections are the children in this page. So they are the containers that will increase or decrease in size. And you can see I didn't really want to messing too much with the width, so I did set a minimum and maximum, and I also set a minimum height, and that's mainly because of this one that gets so big. And the first thing we'll take a look at is the shape, the very first one that kind of morphs into a square. So I'm using the animation property. And the animation itself is called morph. And where that is located is down here, where we can see at keyframes, and here's the name, morph. And so this is what it's morphing from and morphing to. So it is a radial gradient, turquoise to black, with a border radius of 50%, which is what's creating the circle. Otherwise, I would have a square. And that's the starting point. And then the ending point is going to be a radial gradient magenta to black. And I've got the dimension specified. And I have a border radius of 0. Okay, so let me reload the page because that only plays 20 times and there's a delay. But you can see how it's morphing back and forth. Okay, excuse me, it only plays 10 times. So back to this code, it's going to run the morph animation at about 5-second intervals or half a second intervals, and there is a 1-second delay between when the page loads and when that animation starts, and it's going to repeat 10 times. Okay, and then I have directions set to alternate, so basically what happens then is it goes from circle to square, it goes back and forth. So that is the first square. It's using morph ID, and we have the animation itself defined down here in the keyframes. So then if we come down and look in our code, where it says morphing shape, we have a class of ball and another class of center. So if you want to center anything, you create a center class and just set the margin right and margin left to auto. That will automatically center things. So the class is actually creating the ball itself. And if you come up here and look, we have a little top margin that gives us some space above the ball. Border radius is making it into a circle because it starts as a square. And then we've got a width and height of 100. And then this is the radial gradient that you see on all of the balls. Okay, so that morphing shape is located right in here. Next, we will take a look at the bouncing ball. So it's very similar to morph, right? We have our animation tag, And we have to connect that to the keyframe. So we have our keyframe animation named bounce. So if we come down here, you can see here's where bounce is located. And instead of using from and to, I actually specified increments. I mean, you can do increments of 1%, 5%, you know, however you want. And here I'm using transform, translate, and I'm giving it an X and a Y coordinate. Okay, so this is like its starting point, and then it moves to this coordinate, then it moves to this coordinate, and so on. Okay, so that is how I am getting the movement of this ball. Okay, and so it goes one way in those little small increments, because this is really just going from one way to the next, kind of in a V shape. And on the animation itself, if we come up here and look, I do say animation direction alternate, which is why it keeps going. And for this one, it's going to repeat 20 times. And the animation itself is lasting about 10 seconds, which is pretty slow. So you could actually mess around with that number and speed it up if you wanted it to go a little faster. I kind of like the slow motion. It looks smooth because I have all of these different positions. And where this bouncing ball is located is kind of in the middle. And you can see I have a class of ball, which is giving us that round shape. I've centered it, and the ID is called bounce. Up here, the ID is called morph. IDs are designed to be used with one element. Okay? Whereas classes are designed to be used with multiple elements. And this ball class we use multiple times, but we only use morph once, and we're only using bounce one time. Then we have ball transform, and this is our last one, where we point and it gets quite a bit larger and the color changes. And so for this one, this is where it starts. And for this, we have a hover state. So it's a little different than the other ones where we had keyframes. Okay, we have a hover state on this. And when we point at it, you'll notice it's going to change the top margin. So right now, when we're looking at it, this is how it looks. Okay, it's got a top margin of I think 50. Okay, we kept the border radius at 50% because we wanted a circle. These are the dimensions, these are the colors. When we hover, when we point, the top margin is going to increase because the size is going to increase, and we don't want the ball to be over the top of our text. So we're going to give it a pretty big top margin. And as far as the transformation scale, we're going to make it 3 times its original size, and we are changing the color. So all we have to do to play this is point at it. And here, we're not actually using this. So if you wanted something to rotate, that is what this keyframe would be used for. If you had rotated text and you wanted to point and make it normal, that's the kind of thing you'd use it for, but we actually aren't using this keyframe. We are centering. This is a class that we have applied to multiple things, if you look. And for our text, we did that same hover animation that we have on the ball. Okay, so for our text, we kind of just start with regular H2 center aligned, and when you point, it gets a lot bigger and the color changes. Okay, and then this is a pretty short HTML section because most of the work here is being done in CSS. The most important things that you do down here in HTML is apply the correct IDs because that is going to affect how the balls look. And for the ones that are animated, it will also impact the animation. And then we also have a class of center. Now you'll notice that the first two have a class of ball, but the last one does not, and that is because we have the hover state applied. So we just have a class of center on the last one, and we're actually using this ID to create the ball. Okay, so if we kind of come up here and look at that again, this is creating the ball. We're not using the ball class. And we did this on purpose because we want to be able to hover over that ID and have it change. Okay, and this is how it should look when it's done. And some of the animation was only going to play when you first load. This last ball, anytime you point, it will enlarge, but the other two only do it when you first load your page.